Hello, and welcome to the Chiaroscuro Jazz Podcasts. I'm George Graham, Director of Artistry and Repertoire for the Venerable Jazz label, which for over a half-century has been presenting music from some of the world's great jazz musicians. In this series, we'll have conversations with some of today's outstanding players and their thoughts on some of the artists who have recorded for Chiaroscuro. This time we conclude our conversation with saxophonist, arranger, and producer Tom Scott, who over a 50-year career has developed a reputation as the ultimate studio musician, appearing on over 2,000 recordings, including many classics from Carole King, Joni Mitchell, Steely Dan, Whitney Houston, and many others. Previously, Tom talked about his work creating soundtracks for TV shows, and then on to his work with Carole King, with Joni Mitchell as both a studio musician and also recording and touring with Tom's band the LA Express, and his work shaping the sound of Steely Dan's classic album Asia. This time, Tom talks about becoming a member of the Blues Brothers band in the 1980s.
I'll tell you the story of that.
Okay.
So here's what happened. I've been in New York. I had been in New York a few times and was acquainted with some of the horn players that became the Blues Brothers. I knew Blue Lou Marini and Tom Malone. I knew them both, and I had seen the skit that was actually the kind of the initial Blues Brothers experiment, which was on Saturday Night Live one night. John Belushi told me later that their whole outfit, the hats and the suits and the sunglasses, was sort of a takeoff on Roy Orbison, because he always dressed kind of like that. So that was just the uniform they chose. And I saw the skit and I thought, oh, that's cool. You know, they're doing blues, and that's great. And then in LA, I saw in the paper where during the summertime at Universal Amphitheater that Steve Martin, who at the time was the hottest stand-up comic in 1978, he was the deal. And who was opening? The Blues Brothers. I thought, oh, this is great. So maybe I'll hit on Lou or Tom. Maybe they can get me backstage. I just like to hang and maybe meet three of the hottest comics in the nation: Steve Martin, John Belushi, and Dan Aykroyd. Well, as it turns out, I didn't have to do that, because about 2 weeks before this gig, Tom Malone calls me and he says, Tom, listen, we're doing this gig at the amphitheater. I said, I know. He says, my wife is set to deliver a baby on the Wednesday morning of this week, from Monday through Sunday, I guess it was, at the Universal Amphitheater. Can you cover for me the first couple of days? I said, let me think it over. No, I didn't say that at all. I said, sure, of course. So Monday afternoon, I show up at the Universal Amphitheater. I meet John and Danny. They were very nice. And I do the gig. It was great. And on Tuesday, I realized, we haven't talked about money, and it's I'm reluctant to do that, because, and certainly not with other members of the band, because you never know, guys may have different deals, and and this is a matter that I got to take up with John directly, right? So I had a road manager, Jimmy Root, who in fact I had met through Lou Adler. He was Cheech and Chong's road manager. And that was a tough gig, because there were a lot of physical things and props and stuff that he was really good at that, and really, quick and on the case and very efficient. And so Cheech and Chong were not touring that at that time. So I said, Jimmy, help me out here. So I said, look, when there's a lull in the conversation between me and John, why don't you bring up the subject of money? Because I'm not comfortable doing that. Okay, fine. So I bring Jimmy along, and I'm talking to John Belushi, and there's a lull in the conversation. And Jimmy, wanting to promote my the highest possible salary he could get for me, says, John, Tom usually gets triple scale, meaning, of course, I got paid triple union scale, which wasn't always true, okay? But sometimes it was true, but not always. So John says, oh, really? And so from that point on saxophone, Tom Triple Scale Scott.
Wow.
So Wednesday comes along, And I go down there thinking I'm just going to hand off back to Tom Malone. His wife had the baby, was on his way out to L.A. from New York. No problem. And I said, Tom is there. John comes up to me and says, listen, Tom, let's just make it 4 horns instead of 3. You're a blues brother. And with that pronouncement, I became a blues brother.
Cool.
So I stayed through the remainder of that live recording, which is called Briefcase Full of Blues. That was the initial Blues Brothers offering, which was in fact our 35 or so minute hot opening set. It was, I still remember, because so few people really had ever, well, nobody ever heard the Blues Brothers in concert before, right? It was a smoking band. You know, Steve Jordan and Paul Schaefer on piano, and the 2 guitar players, Matt Murphy and Steve
Cropper.
Cropper, yeah. And the horn section, Alan Rubin, great trumpet player, and the 4 of us horns were killing it, kicking it, you know. So the reaction of the crowd is what we used to call a trout crowd, meaning there's a bunch of people in the audience going with their mouths wide open, looking like they're about to be hooked by a fisherman. That's the way it was. They were like stunned at how amazing it was, and it was great. It was great fun, and actually Danny became the godfather of my son. And his girlfriend at the time, Carrie Fisher, who became a dear friend, was the godmother of my son as well. So it was personal as well as musical.
Well, that's great. That's great. You know, music can spawn friendships, relationships, marriages too. Sometimes
it did all of that.
Right. Well, maybe there's something you might want. Any particular projects you have in mind, that you have coming up? I know you're doing the podcast, so we can maybe talk a little bit about that, because you've had quite a few very interesting people on that, and now you're sort of on the other side of the microphone here with this podcast we're doing with you.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I'm good on either side. Right. I'm fine. But well, this was during once the pandemic started. Like so many of us, it was like, okay, I got a lot of free time now, and I have a couple of dear friends back east. One is the head of the jazz department at NYU, a guy named Dr. Dave Schroeder. I met him when he came out to interview me, and it must have been almost 10 years ago now, and we became fast friends. Great guy. Our tastes in music are practically identical. I mean, the albums that we talked about as our favorites, it's almost the same list. And he introduced me to a guy named Joe Vella, who is used to be a drummer, but he has done a lot of social media stuff for jazz people, Pat Metheny, Lyle Mays, and others. And he helped me get my website up. And I think it was Dr. Dave who said, listen, because I had done some YouTube videos. One of them was explaining about how I got in the Blues Brothers. Another one was about my years with George Harrison on the road and so on. And he said, you have a good voice for this kind of stuff. You should do a podcast. Okay. Come to find out, I really enjoy the research part. I enjoy, getting as much information in front of about the person as I can, and trying to ask questions. I'm not interested. Well, I'm only marginally interested in what they're doing right at this moment. I want to know their life story. And I sort of divided it into 3 parts. I want to know about their childhood, where they grew up, what was their home life like, what was the music they listened to, and when was that thing? Was it a person or an event or something that made them go, hey, maybe I could be good at this? It's by this I mean the thing that we know them for later down the road. And of course, most fascinating usually is that period of transition from that inspiration to how you get to being, well known in that field. That's always that trip is always full of interesting anecdotes. I just recalled. So I've done, as you say, I've not just done people in the music field, because having been in Hollywood for, an adult for 55 years, I've met a lot of people, and who are still dear friends. And so I asked some of my actor and director and producer friends, as well as musicians, um, and I've met other people along the way, completely out of show business. One guy in particular is a guy named Steve Squires. Steve was the head scientist at NASA who launched the two Mars rover missions, the first two explorers.
Oh
And
yeah,
the
I
reason
remember.
we became, yeah,
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
seeing he was on Nova and on one of those PBS
that's right.
Novas
Of course he
interviews.
was.
Yes.
And I saw him at a lecture. And what I loved about him is, look, what do I know about rocket science? Nothing. But what I loved about him was his almost boyish enthusiasm about, and his love for what he does, for astronomy, and the higher goal of, like, finding out what's going on out there in the universe. And I was so taken. We are now very, very close friends. We talk quite frequently, and it's just one of those things. I like people who have emotions about their craft, and can talk about it, as I say, all, with an almost childlike enthusiasm. That's what I love. And also, he could put it in terms that, I, who don't know all about it, can understand. So there's people like that. Of course, there's actors I know, Jim Belushi, um, oh gosh, Angelica Houston. Um, Look, I'm a good listener. I have selfish reasons for doing that. I find that if you listen, you learn stuff. Hey, and I like learning stuff. Still, I'll be 75 tomorrow, and I still like learning stuff.
Well, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. So far, so good, right?
Yeah, right. I asked Tom about a new album with the great vocalist Jack Jones, for which Tom was co-producer, and which featured organist and multi-instrumentalist Joey DeFrancesco, who passed away at age 51 shortly after the album was completed.
Yes. Oh, God. Such a drag we lost Joey. My Lord. Yeah, it was a great, great project. Jack Jones, who, of course, is in his 80s, still has a great singing voice, is a great guy, and uh, our friend, his buddy and mine, Paul Loudon, graciously decided to put this project together with the two of them. Um, and Joey is such a great talent. God, he's so fun to listen to. He plays that Hammond organ like nobody's business. He also played saxophone and trumpet quite well. And so this was an album featuring the two of them with strings. It was a huge project, actually.
I never knew how much I love you. I never knew how much I care. When I put my arms around you, I get a fever that's so hard to bear. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight, fever in the morning, fever all through.
Oh, John Clayton wrote the arrangements, and we spent 3 or 4 days in the studio. It was just elegant as hell. It was just a delightful experience.
So tragic at a young age there. And we'll be talking with Jack Jones in an upcoming podcast. I asked Tom Scott about some of the artists who record for Chiaroscuro Records and his experience with them. Have you worked with George Young?
Of course I have. Sure, George is a dear friend, and funny and great, delightful. Yes.
Because he's recorded for Chiaroscuro a couple of times. I've had an
Great.
opportunity to work with him personally as well. So yeah, he's a great personality, and he comes back east from time to time, and we'll do a show. And yeah, it's great to work with.
Right.
In one of our earlier podcasts, Tom talked about his association with pianist Roger Kellaway.
So Roger, yes. So Roger, of course, I met Roger when he came out to L.A. from New York, to play with Roger Kellaway's big band. That's where I met him, and was just stunned by his massive technique and his swing. His rhythm was just awesome. I mean, his sense of rhythm is just ridiculous, and he has these great big hands. So he looks almost like a spider on the keys. You know, he's got it. I mean, just amazing chops on the piano, and of course he knows all the old tunes and new tunes, and could go, as I said before, either stride, old school, or avant-garde with equal ease in either field, or straight ahead bebop, or you name it. And once we started playing, he invited me to play with him at Dante's, again, this club, which was kind of a key to my early success. I became part of his quartet, and at one point we had developed some tunes. I wrote one or two, and he said, "Look, Dick Bach wants to record me at Pacific Jazz Studios, and let's go in as a quartet and do it." And we did an album called Spirit Feel, which I was thrilled to be on. And I have followed Roger all through the years. I helped him pick the personnel for his cello quartet. Is the first cello quartet album, which he was asking me about a cello player who he should get, and I said, "I got the guy for you. His name is Edgar Lustgarten. He was the first cellist at Fox for many years, but just had this marvelous sound and a great kind of modern sensibility as well. And a great guy." And he turned out to be the right call. And that first album, that cello quartet album, which I played on a couple of tracks just in the orchestra. Mm-hmm. I think it's still a masterpiece of, I don't know how to call that, new age. To me, that's the best of what became the new age music. It's just phenomenal.
Well, they call some of that stuff third stream too. The kind of classical.
Yeah, third stream. Yeah. That's a Gunther Schuller term, as I recall.
Right. Yeah. Well, here's another name that maybe you can talk about. Clark Terry. Have you had an opportunity to work with him?
You bet. Oh my gosh, Clark Terry. He was a real great jazz player, and he did something that not enough young players particularly understand, that he played happy. There was a just an upbeat feel to, "Hi, how you doing?" kind of an attitude to his solos, which was just lovely and so exhilarating to hear. I remember I have this memory of Clark Terry playing at Dante's, which is kind of, I guess, the one of the musical centers of the universe in Los Angeles at that time. And I'm in a booth, and I'm with Quincy Jones. I remember that. I don't know how, I knew Quincy, and Quincy's been very, very helpful to me over the years in other ways, which we could talk about if you like. But I just remember we're sitting there listening to Clark Terry, and we both burst out into laughter. And I look at him, and we're both laughing uproariously at something that Clark played, For those of us,
that humorous mumbles thing too going.
And mumbles. I loved mumbles. Oh my God. I bought that 45 and played it. I couldn't believe how great it was. Yeah.
She no lonely people home. She no lonely people on the home together. She's only on the bound the home together.
Great sense of humor. I want the sense of humor to be back in jazz today, more of it. Because I feel that so many young players, they're like all serious. They have lots of technique and they go all around the horn. But I wanted to, show me some love, show me some happiness, show me some joy. That's what Clark Terry did.
Yeah. Well, he was a great mentor for generations of people. We look back on some of the. I was looking at some of the personnel on the sort of student or young bands that he put together in the I guess 90s or early, and people like Helen Sung are on there. Some of these wonderful contemporary players that were just young kids in his band at that time.
Right. Clark was just a gift to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't know how else to say it. I mean, he was a. I just been reminded. I saw him at some. Gosh, I don't remember what it was, a brass convention or something. He was being given an award, and he was in a wheelchair by then. And they asked him to say a few words, and he was a bit feeble and struggling a bit. And he said, I just want to say the golden years suck. Oh, gosh. He was great.
Yeah.
He was just great. Oh, and here's another Clark Terry. So I did a record with Dave Grusin. Was it a Gershwin tribute, I think? It was several CDs set for GRP. And there I am in a booth with Clark Terry and me and a rhythm section, small rhythm section out in the front of the studio. But we're isolated, just he and I. So I got to sit with him. I mean, and I'm like, this is totally cool. But in the middle of the session, he gets the news that Dizzy Gillespie has passed. And he burst into tears and was so heartbroken by that, we had to stop the session for about half an hour and let him collect himself. I thought that was so sweet and so, touching. Obviously, they were very close.
We did a reissue of a Gil Goldstein album recently that was it had been released on LP but went out of the catalog, but I did a remaster of it and we put it out on CD. It has Toots Thielman on it and a couple of other really good cats whose names escape me at the moment, but that was a really nice record.
Gil Goldstein is a monster talent, great arranger. He played it. One of the few guys other than Tommy Gamina from the Buddy DeFranco Tommy Gamina group of the old days, one of the few guys who could make me happy playing the accordion.
Yeah, right.
They don't grow on trees, those people, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. Earlier, Tom talked about the podcast series he's been doing, nearly 50 episodes. I asked him about some of the takeaways he's gotten from talking with the various people.
I find that I really, really enjoy talking to people and finding out their story, the backstory of their lives, how they got to be where they are. And I tell you what I want people to understand is that virtually no one, and I've done like 50 of them, 50 podcasts of people who are in their field very, very famous. Not a one of them walked into a room and said, here I am. There was always a struggle. It's never easy. I want people to know that it's, what's that old rock and roll song? I get knocked down, I get up again. You've got to get up again. Don't be discouraged. Pursue your dreams and expect people to say no, because the easiest thing for people to tell you is no. That's easy. And all you need is one yes to move to the next level. And you've got to be persistent because, as I say, people tend to not want to, give you a break because it means they've got to go out of their way in some respect. And you just got to, if you really believe in yourself, you got to keep pushing ahead because nobody ever made it. None of these famous people ever made it, would have ever made it had they said, okay, I got to know, so forget it. I'm going to just be defeated. No, that's not the way to pursue life. Pursue it and go for your dreams. Pursue them with vigor. And, I don't believe in luck, but I think all these interviews have made it clear that you can put yourself in a position for good things to happen to you by being positive and forging ahead and, not letting rejection get you down.
A big thanks to Tom Scott for sharing his experiences with us. You can find Tom Scott on his website at tomscottmusic.com, including his numerous podcasts. Now let's go out with a piece by Clark Terry on Chiaroscuro Records. This is Spacemen from the album of the same name. Clark Terry and Spacemen from his chiaroscuro album of the same name, recorded in 1989. You can find information on this and over 100 other titles on chiaroscuro on our website at chiaroscurojazz.org, where you can find more of these podcasts. And why not subscribe to the Chiaroscuro podcast wherever you get your podcasts? This is George Graham, writer and producer for this podcast series. Thanks to Jim Della Croce for his assistance in arranging the interviews, and thank you for joining us.